Good evening, you're watching The Buck Stops Here and I'm Barkha Dutt. On the program this evening, we'll be talking to one of the biggest names in the digital world, the Senior Vice President of Google, Nikesh Arora. We all know now that Google is a verb. But what's the future of Google? And has digital media, in fact, made us less social instead of more? All that and more, but first, the headlines. On The Buck Stops Here this evening, our newsmaker is one of the biggest names in the digital world. He was born in India, grew up the son of an Air Force officer and a mathematician mother. And then, of course, like so many other Indians, went to study abroad. One thing led to the other, and then Nikesh Arora became somebody to be taken very seriously in Google as the Senior Vice President and the Chief Business Officer. He's our newsmaker tonight. Nikesh, pleasure to have you on the program. Let me start by asking you something that strikes me while introducing you as Senior Vice President and Chief Business Officer, Google. Yes. When you think about the fact that Google started off as a company where the founding or the founder's letter was a kind of alternative challenge to tradition. Yes. And it was all about not being too corporate. It was actually all about being the alternative hierarchy. Where does that
you know what? It's actually funny. We debated what should one call oneself. And we've been through all sorts of funny titles, you know, like the guy who takes care of the money or the guy who brings the bacon home. Eventually decided for some corporate title. Because
were you ever called the guy who
brings the bacon home? Yeah. No, not yet. But we actually debated that for a few minutes. But we thought we will settle for Chief Business Officer. But going back to your earlier comment, the founder's letter was very inspiring. That's why I ended up working at Google, because I thought I had it with corporate life. I was done. I didn't want to work for a traditional business. But when I read the founder's letter, it actually inspired me, because it's not about an alternate hierarchy as much as it is about doing things different, as well as not doing things just for the heck of it. And seems to have worked so far.
But as Google expands, is there a danger that somewhere that original dream will get lost? Because, you know, anti-establishment eventually becomes establishment. The boys in the garage eventually become the corporate czars. As true for you as for, you know, Page and Brin?
Eventually is a very long time. Eventually we will all
10 years,
end up
5
in
years.
dust,
Eventually
right?
we're all dead.
Exactly. So somewhere between now and eventually things will happen. Look, we worry about that every day. We try and make sure that we try and, you know, it starts from the people we hire. We spend a lot of time trying to understand who you hire, because we believe people make the company. It's not our products, it's not our brand, it is people. So we spend a lot of time checking people and figuring out who the right people to work at the company are. And we're constantly challenging tradition, whether it is being disruptive in any space that we're in, whether it's being disruptive in our management practices. We do silly things, you know.
What's the silliest thing you've done recently?
The silliest thing we did recently was, you know, when we launched Google+. In fact, last week we all changed our pictures and had scary Halloween pictures of all of our management. The first thing we did, we launched a new product called the Creative Kit, and we all went and doctored our pictures, and we all look like Frankenstein monsters. That's pretty radical for a large company, if you know, people have titles like which are long and scary. We also there was most recently when we launched Google+, it was a different code name internally, which had to do with the oceans and the seas. So we brought in a surf machine that makes real surf.
Are you serious?
Yes, and we brought it on campus, and people showed up in their shorts and they were surfing in the middle of our campus. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
It is.
That is crazy. What does that crazy do for you guys?
I think crazy inspires people. I think crazy tells people not to take life too seriously. I think crazy also tells all of us that it's okay to think different. Because the risk we have is that, you know, we always make sort of this, we always have this conversation internally. We try and give somebody something to do. We always want to see if that person has a passion for it. So we will try and make sure that we don't give people jobs just because they're getting sort of more senior or they need more responsibility. We'll try and find the person who has the passion, because we found that if somebody doesn't have the passion, they pretty much end up not doing a good job at it.
Is it really serious and true that you guys once hired somebody who was the world knitting champ?
Yes, we did.
And why did she or he qualify to work at Google? Because they were great at knitting.
No, that's what we try and do is we're trying to look for people who have natural smarts. So we want people who are naturally raw smarts, naturally curious.
Yeah.
And you can do that by looking at people's grades. You at least get, you make sure you don't get a false negative. Sorry, you don't get a false positive. You can get a false negative. It's okay once in a while. But we try and make sure people have raw smarts. But then we're looking for somebody who is going to have passion. And very often, people who are very good at one thing have had to make sacrifices in their life. People who are great athletes, people who are great swimmers, people who are great golf players, people who are great tennis players, they've had to not go out party, they've had to wake up at 5 in the morning, they've had to make sacrifices because they know how it takes to pursue their dream. And it doesn't matter if your dream is knitting or if your dream is, to win the Olympic gold medal. We've got a figure skater, Olympic gold figure skater who ran our business in Finland for the longest time.
What was your passion before you joined? And what do you think was the passion that was recognized when you did your famous interview at the museum in London? What do you think they saw in you? What was that passion?
I don't know, that you're going to have to ask them. But
what were you passionate about?
I like to get things done right.
But that's generally true for many jobs.
Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully they recognize some part of that. I read a lot. I play a lot of golf. I play a lot of tennis. Like to spend a lot of time out doing something fun.
You once called something quite interesting the airport test.
Yes.
That Google employees usually have to pass the airport test.
Yes.
What's the airport test? I spent a hell of a lot of time in airports, so do you. What's the airport test?
See, that's a very important test. Have you ever walked into an airport, seen an empty chair, or walked into a plane and see somebody sitting there and you've got to sit next to that person, and you make that split-second decision if you're going to end up wanting to talk to that person for the next 8 hours.
Or cover your blanket and pretend that you're sleeping.
Exactly.
Or ask the hostess if there's another seat at the back with no one sitting next to you.
That's the airport test. If you get stuck in an airport with an employee, do you actually want to enjoy those 3 hours or 5 hours, have a great conversation, or are you going to be hiding under the blanket? And if you believe when you meet somebody you're going to hide under the blanket, it's best not to hire them.
And do you think you passed the airport test?
I don't know. Find out.
No, but seriously.
You can tell me after this hour is over.
No, seriously. Is it that Google is looking for individualism above everything else?
Individualism. You can
Eccentricity?
say that. You can say that. We're looking for people whose passion has not been blunted, who have not sort of stopped doing things, stopped being naturally curious. We're looking for people who still have it in them to go out and do something different, be naturally curious, go build something, disrupt something, think big. So for all those reasons, we want people who are still uncluttered in their head.
Are you?
I hope so.
How do you handle disparate identities? You're back here in Delhi. Your parents live here on the outskirts in Gurgaon. But perhaps for all practical purposes, would you call yourself an American?
That's a long debate, right? So in terms of what is your nationality.
But do you have an intuitive thing? Do you grapple with multiple identities?
I don't know as multiple identities. I think part of it is being adaptive to different cultures. I think my father's in the Air Force, so every few years we pack our bags and move to a different city, which can be quite harrowing for a young kid. You lose your friends, you've got to make new friends, you've got to understand how a new school works, you've got to understand the dynamics. So
how often did you move around when you were a kid?
I want to say every 3-4 years. I must have been to 6 or 7 schools in 12 years because I was thrown out of the school but my dad moved. But sometimes you get that too. And when you do that, you suddenly realize you have to be adaptive to every culture that you go into. So part of my professional life I've spent working in different parts of Europe, I've been working in the US and different parts of Asia. So one is adaptive. One adapts to the culture, one finds the things that you enjoy over there and you...
But you grew up in Delhi. Among the schools you study at is the Air Force School. You go on to Banaras Hindu University. And then the world opens up, right? But you keep coming back. You've even been back to BHU and so on. I'm just wondering how important the roots in India are for you personally, for your family. Does it impact how you want to bring up children?
Oh, totally. I think, the fact that I'm back here is because I'm an Indophile, right? I like everything in this country. I like it for all its goods and all its not so goods. So I'm back here. I love what happens over here. I obviously have a soft spot in my heart for this country and everything that happens here.
Do you feel Indian?
I think so. Sometimes I feel I'm more Indian than many people I run into over here.
And if I said, do you feel American?
I think a part of me does, yes. I think from a professional culture perspective, yes. I think I haven't worked here as long as I've worked over there. So professionally, I feel that I've worked in that culture, I understand that culture. Personally, I feel I'm more connected to this country.
Many people of your generation, and we're the same generation, a lot of my friends who went away, worked on Wall Street, they packed their bags up and they came back home at some point. What do you think explains that trend? Because right now, the India story is not sounding as great as it used to sound, maybe 3 years ago.
And the American story is sounding good.
I was coming to that. That's sounding pretty bad.
I preempted your question.
You did?
Yes. I mean, I don't know, but when I was growing up, I don't remember for the first 20 years of my life worrying about the economy and worrying about what's happening in the country and whether I should live here or not live here. So, you know, you make do with what happens, and it doesn't matter what the story looks like. It depends on what you want to create your story to be.
But how do you react and understand this sort of global disenchantment with the conventional model of capitalism? Some people have said it's not...
Wait, those are three very big words. Global disenchantment with the conventional...
You want to Google them?
No, I think I understand what they mean, but global disenchantment with conventional capitalism.
There seems to be, in India, for example, huge debate about corporate ethics unfolding right now. Occupy Wall Street going on in New York every day, resonance in Europe, you've got countries that may go under. Some people are saying this is disillusionment with crony capitalism, not with capitalism. But I'm just wondering...
Once you're not disillusioned with any kind of crony behavior, whether it's in capitalism or not.
Absolutely. Right? But I'm just wondering, does this impact Google at all? Does this impact your life? You've been in the finance sector, you've seen that side of it. You know, you're in business. I mean, you may be in a very creative business, but you're in business in the end. Is this a tough time to be in America?
Oh, there's a lot of different questions in there, right? I mean, let's start at the beginning, right? I think the more fundamental thing, if you look at what's going on in the world, right, we're all getting connected. Our access to information is phenomenal. If you go back in history, information was power. People who had information hoarded it. People who had information were more important than the others. So what you're seeing is a liberation of information. I'm coming to your point, right? Liberation of information from the fact that, you know, I call this a new form of social activism. The fact that we're all connected to the web, we can, you know, sort of have flash gatherings. Occupy Wall Street is done by Twitter and Facebook and Google, right? We get there, or all the uprisings you see in the Arab Spring have all happened because of social activism caused by access to information. Are you telling me that it was perfect in any era before us and everything was fine? No, we just didn't know about it. And when a lot of people got together, they changed it. So I think the good news in this is that if there are problems that are there in our society or in capitalism, they're going to get fixed because people are getting more and more aware of them and they're organizing to fix it, which is a good thing. I saw this interesting movie on my flight over here. I don't know if you've seen it, Midnight in Paris.
Yeah, Woody Allen, right?
Exactly, and I sort of went out and said, if there was an era you could live in, what era would it be? So a lot of people responded back to me and telling me when it would be on Google Plus and on various social networking platforms. People came back, and it's funny, very few people want to be in the era we're in.
That's what I was saying. That's why I called it global disenchantment. Not such a big word.
But my point is, I think that...
Why are we all feeling so cynical right now about the world we live in?
But my point is, it all depends on your mindset. You could be disenchanted if you were in a different era because you could